Welcome to another one in our series of conversations about youth work during coronavirus, where we've been talking to some of our local practitioners and youth and community workers about the impact of COVID-19 on their youth and community work practice and how they're maintaining contact with some of the young people that they're working with. Today, I'm talking to Teswal White, who is the CEO of Activating Creative Talent, CIC, based in Birmingham. And I'm going to let him introduce himself and tell us a little bit about the project itself. Over to you.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you there, Paulette. My name is Teswal White. I am the founding director and CEO of we shortened it now. We don't usually say the full Activating Creative Talent, CIC. Much of our branding and logo says ACT, and we're known as ACT CIC. And I suppose where that kind of comes from is, we want to be known for taking action on the issues that are impacting young people. And yeah, that was, part of our journey was from more of a creative background, activating creative talent and supporting young people to fulfill their potential. But now really, I suppose our work is broken down into kind of three main themes. So our first theme is around critical intervention. So we are supporting high-risk young people who are high risk of being engaged with gangs and youth violence, knife crime and things of that nature. Also supporting a lot of young people around child criminal exploitation, CCE. And that's one of the main themes of our work. But our second theme is around early intervention or early support. And that's where we find ourselves working in a lot of schools, providing a lot of social and emotional development programs for young people, working in small groups, trying to prevent young people from being excluded from school, behavior intervention and things of that nature, a lot of one-to-one support and group work for young people there. And then our namesake, which would be the third theme of activating creative talent. So really it's the solution aspect of working with young people, not just being focused on the problems that young people face, but actually what are we going to do about it? And so our solution really is based on supporting young people around leadership, becoming more employable. And our final one is around enterprise, supporting young people in thinking about becoming more entrepreneurial and adapting probably certain skills that they have into the work market, so to speak. So, that's a general gist of the type of projects that we do. We've been running now since 2012 officially. I had a previous company before ACT CIC called Alchemy Consultancy and Training. And so some of the work really, I suppose, now we're in COVID-19 and we're going to be talking about moving forward. But the last, I suppose, financial crisis in 2008 and the kind of impact that had on us as Alchemy Consultancy and Training. And one of our solutions at that particular point was to create a social enterprise or official social enterprise, because we was always doing socially enterprising work, was to create ACT CIC during that time.
Brilliant. So I think what you've done there is you've shown the diversity of how youth work operates, and that it doesn't have to necessarily be local authority based or organisation kind of company based or located in a building, that actually the toolkit and the skill set that you have as a practitioner can be used in you becoming an entrepreneur, you responding to the needs of young people and being able to do that in quite a fluid way. So when the needs change, you can adapt your skill set to meet those needs. So the different arms of ACT are responding to different groups of young people in different ways, and also across those lines as well. So, you know, if you have the young person who may be peripherally or heavily involved in gang environments, when you work with them successfully, recognize that actually they're quite business savvy. So actually they could harness that skill in a different way, and kind of having those strands helps you to kind of guide them through a process. So it isn't just an isolated input and you work with them and then you leave them. It feels like ACT is there for them throughout, until they're ready to kind of almost fly on their own. But seeing that and recognizing that when you're working with young people, it's got to be bespoke. It's got to be what they need. It can't be a one size fits all. And actually, it sounds like your project is one that's designed around that holistic idea of all young people aren't the same. And we need to be able to respond as effectively as we can across a number of different themes for them. So it feels like, to me, ACT kind of holds them in the palm of their hand until they're ready to kind of leave and then kind of fly on their own, which is brilliant. Brilliant.
We definitely believe in the village principle.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
And in that sense, it is about that, you know, how we support young people on their journey, and recognizing that they're on a journey and supporting them through that journey, rather dictating to them or telling them what they need to do. Obviously, I'm a youth worker, or from a youth work background. You know, you mentioned a few things there. So today, really, I'd probably consider myself to be more of a social entrepreneur, but with a youth work background, using youth work skills, and very appreciative of my own background in terms of youth work and my journey to become a youth worker myself. Which was a diversification of my own skills set as a young person. and finding that my some of my key skills and my assets was about communication, was about problem solving, was about supporting, you know, and loving to support people. And once I'd identified those kind of key assets and skills within myself, you know, that sent me on a certain trajectory to become a youth worker myself.
Brilliant.
And so recognizing that journey, and recognizing the support that I needed at that particular time was really the kind of key principles that were embedded to this particular company. You know, in terms of how we wanted to support young people on their journey, you know, wherever it is that they're actually kind of coming from, and as well trying to get downstream and support young people at a younger age group, to really, I suppose, offset some of the impact of marginalization. I'm not gonna beat about the bush or say that, you know, our society or the way that our society is structured today causes lots of young people to become marginalized, feel isolated, feel not part of the system that they're in, and that as well being one of the root causes to a certain level of disruption or a certain level of getting into criminality and engaging, because again, you know, not necessarily being supported. So we recognize that, and really, I suppose, in terms of youth work, at a time I was always calling it quite earlier on in terms of the unpicking of youth services up and down the country, and really wanted to be ahead of that curve and not necessarily want to be subjected to that. So, you know, quite early, I started to think about different ways that I could still do what it is that I was passionate about and what I love to do, but using alternative methods, developing things like companies. My first company was a limited company. Again, I had a creative agency, so we delivered workshops, across the West Midlands, creative workshops, engagement workshops for young people, which were sold to many different types of services, extended school services, as it was known back then, to councils and things of that nature. So we was always trying to innovate and develop different ways of engaging with young people, supporting young people in different types of ways, really. So yeah.
Brilliant. And now we're at ACT, which is kind of an amalgamation of all of those things. But we're also in the midst of a pandemic,
Yes.
which will present its own issues has presented its issues for everybody globally. So what are some of the particular challenges around the work that you do with ACT that COVID-19 and coronavirus have presented, and how have you overcome them?
Still in the midst. So I wouldn't dare say we're on the other side.
No, not yet.
I would just say that, we as a social entrepreneur, as a CIC, we are used to working in, I suppose, conditions which are not idealistic. The resources are not there, or the respect for your work or value of your work, what you do, is not always there. And so these are the things that we've had to kind of navigate around, and which has made us quite resilient.
Okay.
So we talk about resilience within young people, but also obviously resilience in terms of the work that we do. We are now going to have to become, further to the work that we're already doing, be a lot more creative in terms of how we are approaching our youth work. And it's something that has been on our mind, and I was saying this probably about a week ago, that we've developed some really great campaigns around youth violence. So we developed the Knife Awareness Project, which delivered workshops to over 30,000 young people across the West Midlands, and intensive work with probably about 500 young people around issues around knife crime. We developed the Peace Act, which was a platform for young people to take their creativity. We often hear about things such as the music being a negative source of influence to young people, drill music being one of those things, etc., etc. And what we wanted to do was create a platform for young people, so they could perform in terms of live shows. But one of the conditions of being able to perform on some of those live shows for us would be that you wouldn't be able to chat crud, as the young people might say. You wouldn't be able to talk about things such as violence, and it was a non-violence based project. It was about how do we introduce peace and things of that nature. So could definitely be constructive, can definitely be critical, but to be negative or push, I don't know, I'd say drug lyrics and things of that nature, and talk about violence, is something that we wouldn't promote. So I'll say all that to say that some of the campaigns that we've developed over the years has always had that kind of creative kind of slant to it, and it's how we now take those kind of key things and move that forward. So I've said that the campaigns that we built were very good, they were very effective, but we've never been that great at actually maintaining our presence online. So we can talk about the Peace Act and how wonderful it was, and the Knife Awareness Program in terms of how much, but in terms of sustaining that in an online way kind of, was one of the weaknesses of our organization. So now we're faced in a particular time where we're not able to do direct work with young people. We've got to start thinking about basically how we engage young people more online. And I think the first wave in terms of online, actually youth workers were quite scared, as myself included, actually interacting with young people online and things of that nature brought concerns in terms of policy, in terms of actually how do we communicate with young people online. Now we're talking about, well, actually, how do we engage? How do we build relationships even online? So, some of those things are now going to have to be brought. A situation like COVID-19 is going to bring and propel us forward in terms of that. There's several reports that were written and with a few of my colleagues that talked about, what was kind of taking place online, youth violence being a trigger, or social media being a trigger for youth violence online. So where, certain conversations, certain beefs were being, conflict that were being taken place through YouTube videos, etc. And actually how the challenge was issued, how are youth workers going to respond to that? How are we going to be in some of these spaces where we have active young people who are active in terms of youth violence and operating in gangs, so on and so forth? Actually, how we were going to engage them? How are we going to support them? How are we going to be in those online spaces to offset where the triggers were being were happening? So these are all the kind of challenges, I suppose, that we are faced with, and something like this now, we now result into Zoom, the very call that we're on, to make sure that we can still communicate. We're going to, again, a few of my colleagues, people like Darren from the Epiphany people, using platforms such as Instagram. We had a bit of a conference call of all practitioners that First Class Legacy had called a few weeks ago to discuss actually how we were going to respond. So these are the things now. These are the tools of the 21st century, and really we've got to make sure that we are a part of that wave. And I think something like this COVID-19 presents that perfect opportunity to be a part of that wave, to get on that wave, and ensure that we are doing some of the things.
Yeah, and I think it is a challenge, not just for youth and community work practitioners. I think it's a challenge for everyone, because whilst technology has been around, we've used technology in a particular way. And this unfortunate pandemic presents an opportunity, and it's seen as an opportunity rather than a challenge, I guess. So I guess youth and community workers would embrace this and say, well, how do we navigate this, rather than our work needs to stop? And I guess what you've highlighted there is that that's what's happening. It's a learning curve for everyone, but it's with young people at the centre of that, and how they can continue to be supported in the best way possible. So my final question to you then is, when we move through this pandemic, whenever that's going to be, how do you see the role of youth and community work practitioners working with young people to kind of get them through being quarantined, being segregated, and having to reintegrate and kind of come back together with society? What's the role that you see youth and community workers might be able to play in supporting that with young people?
Yeah, I think it's really, I think when we calculate the cost of our experience over the last few months in terms of COVID-19, and obviously going forward, that there is going to be, I suppose, residue from that impact. So a certain amount of trauma that actually we're all dealing with, and we're talking about even when lockdown has, you know, resumed back to some level of normality, we will still have social distancing, so how we're going to be operating in terms of walking around even shops and things of that nature. So there's going to be a lot of work to do, especially young people who haven't been able to get critical support during this time. And as we know, in terms of, you know, if you think about, you know, young people that are dealing with mental health issues, you know, leaving them for a few weeks without getting critical support can mean that basically that they go much further than what they would have had done with that support in place. And so it's those type of things really that I feel that we're going to be picking up on. We'll probably discover that actually a lot of young people that have completely fell off the radar and we haven't been able to engage and make contact with. You know, it's what state are we going to find those young people in? And that's one of the things that we're trying to do at the moment with a few of the programs that we're operating and running, is really trying to get into the back of actually, can we get hold of some of the most hard to reach young people that we know are not going to be engaging with schools, possibly unknown to social services, or even known. So one of the programs that we're involved at the moment is a resettlement program, which is going to be dealing with the resettling of young people coming out of prison. Okay. So, you know, and the implications for that. And at the moment, we're still trying to get our way with actually, how do we work? How do we support? Because typically what that would have meant is that actually would have, you know, we would have pulled off a certain amount of visits to prison by now, started to build a relationship with that young person, start looking forward about some of the plans and action plans and starting to support that young person coming through the gate. And now at the moment, we can't get into the prison. So, you know, which presents its own challenges. So these are all kind of issues that we're working through right now. And it's the implications in terms of how we're going to maneuver, how we're going to work, how we're going to utilize technology, how we're going to, you know, still be able to function with social distancing, you know, in this particular day and age, really. So, you know, we're going to be solving those problems as we go along.
Yeah.
You know,
there's going to definitely be some of that.
Yeah. So it's just again, being open, being creative, to you know, work with what you've got. We've always done. You know, one of the impacts.
That resilience again, doesn't it? That resilience to be.
It comes back down to
your commitment to the work that you're doing, and navigating your way through any kind of challenges to still meet that commitment to working with young people and to supporting young people.
Exactly.
So thank you. I want to thank you for your time, because I know you're busy, and for your continued support in quite a challenging time, and in a different way from maybe local authorities and other types of youth organisations, because yours is a CIC and it's kind of run and governed by you and your team, how your challenges are different to the challenges of maybe a local authority or other statutory service, but nonetheless, the commitment to still maintain and sustain that relationship with young people and to continue to work with them during and beyond this pandemic is... Yeah,
definitely. I mean, one of the things that we do as an organisation also is we run the Working with Gangs and Youth Violence course, which I probably didn't mention earlier on, which is a level 3 OCN course. So we currently run that course. So one of the challenges that we had to really kind of was how do we get this course online? And the course itself being quite a dynamic course and based off, you know, the conversations that I have in person. You know, I had to kind of explain at one particular point when we went to Zoom that, okay, it wasn't going to be a case that people could just watch the recordings later on. And you need to be a part of the conversation. You need to be a part of those discussions, because it's those critical discussions is where a lot of the learning takes place. So, you know, we've managed it. We've managed to kind of, you know, change some of the modules slightly, and change how we would deliver some of those modules. We've managed to go from, like, I don't know, the course is typically delivered about 3.5 hours. If we were in a training center, that we typically are, we're based at the Legacy Center, so over in Aston, and we would be in there in a room for 3.5 hours discussing and debating and working through the content of the course. But now recognizing the fact that actually we're in people's homes and that people are looking after their children. So to try and deliver a course for 3.5 hours wasn't necessarily going to work. So actually how we have to compact some of that content, and then be a bit more creative in terms of, you know, things that can be done within their own time, and setting more smaller tasks and things of that nature to help people navigate through the course. And all of that whilst people have still got their own dilemmas and their own issues going on, because obviously COVID-19 is impacting people in multiple different ways. People have lost people, people have lost homes, you know, have been kicked out of homes, etc., etc. So it's created all kinds of dilemmas, and again, the same type of principle in terms of how we're working with young people. You know, we've had to support our students the best way we can to keep them on track, and keep them focused at the same time, but being considerate to actually what's going around in their world. So, yeah.
Brilliant. So thank you for this. Thank you for taking the time out and for informing us about the work that you're doing and the continued support you give to young people. And if anybody watching this video wants to know more about the BA Honours Youth and Community Work degree at Newman University, you can click on the link in the description box. And there's also a link to ACT's website also. So if you want to find out some more information about ACT, the project, what it does, how it works with young people, and maybe if you've got some time to volunteer and get involved, click the link in the description box below, and then you can get in touch with Teswal and his team.
We're looking for mentors.
Oh, they're looking for mentors. Thanks very much.